Silas Ward awoke to the haunting sound of hooves thundering against the earth. The rhythmic pounding vibrated through the wooden walls of his trading post, rattling the bottles on the shelves. Silas had been drinking the night before, and his mind was clouded by the whiskey. As he stumbled toward the window, his feet unsteady, he expected to see a small group of riders, maybe 10, 15 at most. What he saw, however, was a sight that would shake him to his core. In the distance, stretching far beyond what his eyes could follow, was an army. A sea of riders, all clad in leather and war paint, sat motionless upon their horses. There were no shouts, no battle cries. Only the sound of hooves, a sound that, at first, seemed distant but was growing louder with every passing second. As the warriors drew closer, Silas noticed the presence of a single figure among them. He was tall, with silver braids that caught the light of the early morning sun. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and directed at the door of Silas's trading post. This was no ordinary man. This was Crow Feather, the chief of the Mountain Wind Tribe, a name Silas had heard whispered among traders, settlers, and even soldiers. A name that carried weight. A name that, in this part of the world, commanded both respect and fear. Silas's head swam as he processed the scene unfolding before him. "Why are they here?" he muttered to himself, still half drunk and unable to comprehend the significance of what was happening. The day before, Silas had encountered a young woman. She had entered his store with the same caution one might approach a predator's den, careful, deliberate, as if she were waiting for something or someone. She was about 20, with long black hair braided down her back, dressed in a simple, worn dress. Her eyes darted around the shop, examining the goods with the attentiveness of someone who had little money to spend but was searching for something important. Silas watched her from behind the counter, his mind working on a different kind of calculation. "You need work?" he had called out, more out of boredom than necessity. The woman's dark eyes shifted toward him. There was something in her gaze that stopped Silas for a moment. Fear, yes, but something else too. Recognition, perhaps. As if she knew him before he knew her. "I can pay," she had replied softly, holding out a small leather pouch filled with coins. But Silas, whose desires were fueled by more than just the need for work, stepped out from behind the counter. "You can help me organize the store. I'll pay you with food and a little cash for your trouble." She hesitated, eyes flickering toward the door as if looking for an escape route. Silas could see the fear growing in her eyes, but his focus was on the potential for control. "You help me, I help you. Work, and you get what you need." Dewan, the woman, Ayana, as Silas would later learn, backed away toward the storage room as he advanced toward her. There was something unsettling about the way she moved, a quiet desperation in her step that piqued Silas's curiosity. She stopped and turned to face him as he reached for her wrist. "Please," she whispered, "don't touch me." The words hit Silas like a faint echo, and for a moment, a chill ran down his spine. But his drunken state made him bold, and the thought that she might resist only spurred him on. He grabbed her wrist tightly, ignoring her silent struggle. "You'll work," he muttered, dragging her into the storage room. "Few hours, then you can buy whatever you want." Ayana didn't resist physically. She went still, like an animal caught in the jaws of a predator. But Silas noticed something that unsettled him more than any struggle ever could. Her acceptance. She wasn't fighting back, wasn't pleading. It was as if she had anticipated this moment all her life. As if she had been waiting for something far worse than his touch. Hours later, as Ayana stacked his goods and swept his floor without a word, she asked him a question that stopped Silas in his tracks. "Do you know my father's name?" Silas laughed. It was a cruel laugh, born from arrogance and alcohol. "Sweetheart, I don't know any of your people's names. You all look the same to me. Ayanna didn't flinch at the insult. Instead, she stood there silently, clutching a sack of flour, waiting for his amusement to die down. When the silence stretched too long, Silas wiped the tears of laughter from his eyes and looked at her more closely. There was something about her gaze, calm, steady, that made him uneasy. "Why would I care about your daddy?" he asked, his voice tinged with dismissiveness. "Because tomorrow you will meet him," Lyanna said, her voice quiet but firm. Silas chuckled again, but it was a hollow sound. "Is that supposed to scare me?" Her eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "No, but it should." The next morning, the events began to spiral out of control. Silas had no idea what he was about to face. As he opened the door of his trading post, the sound of hooves grew louder and louder. He saw them, 300 warriors, as Ayanna had predicted, marching toward his shop with purpose. There were no shouts, no battle cries, just the deep, rhythmic sound of their horses' hooves pounding against the earth. They surrounded the trading post, their eyes fixed on Silas's door. At the forefront was Crow Feather. His presence was like a mountain, towering and immovable. The old chief dismounted from his horse and walked toward the door, his gaze never leaving Silas. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there, waiting. Silas, now sober but still confused, looked out the window at the warriors. Each one carried a small bundle tied to their saddle. At first, Silas thought they were merely trophies, perhaps feathers or skins, items of value in their culture. But when his eyes landed on the eagle feather placed neatly at his doorstep, something clicked. He had seen feathers like these before. They were messages, sacred in nature. His mind raced. He had broken a rule, one he hadn't known existed. He had touched the daughter of a chief, and now his actions had brought war to his doorstep. But why? Why had the warriors come for him? Ayanna's voice broke through his thoughts. "You touched me," she said calmly, her voice carrying the weight of something ancient and unyielding. "And in doing so, you declared yourself my husband in the eyes of my people. Can I eat?" Crow Feather stepped forward, his massive frame blocking the doorway. His voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of an entire culture's history. "You have claimed my daughter. Now, you must choose. Honor the marriage you've created or face the justice that follows." Silas's heart sank. He knew the law. He had heard the stories. But hearing it now, in the presence of the chief and his warriors, made it real. He was caught in the web of their customs, and there was no escape. He was given a choice, either fight for Ayanna's honor or face exile. Silas was no fighter. He wasn't even sure he could lift a weapon properly, let alone go toe-to-toe with 300 warriors. He chose the trial of endurance. The next few days were the hardest Silas had ever endured. His body, soft from years of comfort, struggled against the harsh wilderness. His feet bled from the rough terrain, and his body screamed for sustenance. But it wasn't just his body that was tested, it was his spirit. As he trekked through the wilderness, he began to reflect on his past actions. He thought about how he had always taken what he wanted, without ever considering the consequences. He thought about Ayanna's face, the fear in her eyes when he first touched her, and the acceptance in her gaze when he dragged her into the back room. The next few days were the hardest Silas had ever endured. His body, soft from years of comfort, struggled against the harsh wilderness. His feet bled from the rough terrain, and his body screamed for sustenance. But it wasn't just his body that was tested, it was his spirit. The wilderness tested Silas in ways he never expected. By the second day, the reality of his situation had set in. His boots were torn, and his feet were raw, bleeding with each step he took. The heat during the day was unbearable, scorching his skin, while the nights brought a chilling cold that crept through his bones. His body, so accustomed to the comfort of his trading post, now felt like it was betraying him with every movement. Yet, it was not just his body that was breaking down, it was his sense of self. For the first time in his life, Silas was forced to rely on nothing but his own resourcefulness. There were no easy solutions. No whiskey to dull the pain, no easy comforts to numb the guilt. There was only the harsh reality of the wilderness, the endless stretch of desert and jagged rock that threatened to swallow him whole. That first night, Silas lay on the ground, his body aching, his mind spinning. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of Ayana's face haunted him. The fear in her eyes when he grabbed her wrist. The way she had stood still, resigned to the fate he had unknowingly set in motion. And now, here he was, out in the wilderness, fighting for his life, not just to survive, but to prove something to her and, more importantly, to himself. In the silence of the desert, he realized something profound. It wasn't just his body that was being tested, it was his character. He thought about all the times he had taken advantage of others, all the times he had forced people to bend to his will. Ayana's words echoed in his mind. You touch women because you are weak. You take what isn't yours because you believe no one will stop you. Those words stung because they were true. Silas realized now that his entire life had been built on the foundation of taking from others. He had taken from Ayana, and from so many others before her. But out here, alone, with nothing but the stars above and the endless desert around him, Silas was forced to face what kind of man he really was. The second day brought more suffering. His lips cracked and bled from the lack of water. His hand, raw and blistered, made it harder to climb over rocks or gather what little sustenance the desert could offer. But Silas kept moving. There was no turning back now. He had made his choice, and if he was to survive, he would have to push past the physical limitations of his body and confront the deeper parts of his soul. It was on the second night that Silas found water. A small spring, hidden between two jagged boulders, offered him a much-needed reprieve. He knelt by the water, cupping his hands to drink, savoring the coolness that soothed his parched throat. It was a moment of relief, but also of reflection. He thought about all the times he had taken water for granted, all the times he had squandered his resources, never understanding the value of what he had until it was gone. By the third day, Silas had reached the edge of the sacred land. His body was broken, his mind foggy with exhaustion, but he could see the distant silhouette of the stone circle. The circle of stones had been a symbol of the test from the very beginning. The mountain peaks loomed in the distance, a silent reminder of the trial that had been laid before him. As Silas reached the circle, he pressed his hand to the center stone, feeling the cool surface beneath his palm. He had made it. He had survived. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. Silas realized that the trial had changed him. It had broken down his old self and built something new in its place. He turned back toward the trading post, knowing the hardest part of the journey was yet to come. He had to return and face the consequences of his actions. No matter what happened next, he would never be the same man who had walked into the wilderness. When Silas finally returned to the trading post, it was near dusk. His clothes were in tatters, his face was sunburned, and his body ached from the harsh conditions of the wilderness. But he was alive, and more importantly, he had changed. Crow Feather and Ayana were waiting for him. The chief's eyes scanned Silas's battered form, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak immediately, but the air was thick with anticipation. The warriors stood behind Crow Feather, their faces painted with the solemnity of the ceremony that was about to unfold. Silas collapsed to his knees before Crow Feather, his body trembling from exhaustion and the weight of what he had just endured. "I made it," he said, his voice hoarse. "I touched the stone. I survived." Crow Feather's gaze softened just slightly. though his words were as unyielding as ever. "You have proven that you are capable of survival," the chief said slowly. "But survival is not enough. You must prove that you are worthy of what you have claimed." Trinor, Silas nodded, understanding the weight of the words. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for something far greater. He was fighting for redemption. As the tribe gathered around, Aina stepped forward, her expression calm but filled with a quiet intensity. She knelt beside Silas, offering him a small, simple necklace made from carved bone. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said, her voice soft but firm. "She wore it through 77 winters. If you truly wish to prove yourself worthy, you will earn the right to wear it." Silas took the necklace, his hands shaking. For the first time, he understood the weight of what he had done. He wasn't just fighting for Ayana's respect. He was fighting for the respect of the entire tribe, for the respect of a culture that had been misunderstood by men like him. He had taken from others his whole life, but now he had to prove that he could give. Crowfeather's voice broke through the silence. "You have made it through the wilderness, but now you must prove your worth to my daughter, to this tribe, and to yourself." Silas rose to his feet, the weight of the necklace around his neck a constant reminder of the journey he had undertaken. He looked at Ayana, his eyes filled with genuine respect. "I will earn this. Every day, I will work to prove that I deserve to wear this." Ayana looked at him, and for the first time since they had met, Silas saw something in her eyes that wasn't fear, wasn't anger. It was something more. It was the beginning of trust, and that was enough. Crowfeather nodded. "You have taken the first step, but remember, words are wind. Your actions will determine if you truly belong to this tribe." Silas understood. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. But he was no longer the man who had grabbed Ayana's wrist in the trading post. He was someone else, someone willing to change, to grow, and to prove that he was worthy of the second chance he had been given. As Silas stood there, the full weight of his transformation sank in. The desert had broken him, but it had also rebuilt him. And now, with Ayana's help, with the tribe's judgment, he would walk a new path, one that would require him to fight not for control, but for respect and redemption. Silas had come to understand that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about acknowledging the mistakes, learning from them, and striving to be better each day. His journey was far from over, but for the first time, he was ready to face whatever came next. Ayana and Crowfeather had given him a chance, and now it was up to him to prove that he was worthy of it. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the tribe began to prepare for the ceremony that would mark Silas's new beginning. In that moment, Silas understood the true meaning of strength, not in taking what wasn't his, but in earning what he truly deserved.